Good evening. We're gonna pick up on Slapstick, Lonesome No More. Alright. Okay. Chapter 7. How nice it would have been, especially for a lot. No, I can't have that. How nice it would have been, especially for Eliza, since she was a girl, if we had been ugly ducklings, if we had become beautiful by and by. But we simply grew more preposterous with each passing day. There were a few advantages to being a male 2 meters tall. I was respected as a basketball player at prep school and college, even though I had very narrow shoulders and a voice like a piccolo, and not the first hints of a beard or pubic hair. Yes, and later on, after my voice had deepened, I had ran as a candidate for senator of Vermont. I was able to say on my billboards, "It takes a big man to do a big job." But Eliza, who was exactly as tall as I was, could not expect to be welcomed anywhere. There was no conceivable conventional role for a female which could be bent so as to accommodate a 12-fingered, 12-toed, 4-breasted, Neanderthaloid half-genius, weighing 1 quintal and 2 meters tall. Even as little children, we knew we weren't ever going to win any beauty contests. Eliza said something prophetic about that, incidentally. She couldn't have been more than 8. She said that maybe she could win a beauty contest on Mars. She was, of course, destined to die on Mars. Eliza's beauty prize there would be an avalanche of iron pyrite, better known as fool's gold. Hi-ho. There wasn't a time in our childhood where we actually agreed that we were lucky not to be beautiful. We knew from all the romantic novels I'd read out loud in my squeaky voice, often with gestures, that beautiful people had their privacy destroyed by passionate strangers. We didn't want that to happen to us, since the 2 of us alone composed not only a single mind, but a thoroughly populated universe. This much I must say about our appearance, at least. Our clothing was the finest that money could buy. Our astonishing dimensions, which changed radically almost from month to month, were mailed off regularly in accordance with our parents' instructions to some of the finest tailors and cobblers and dressmakers and shirt makers and haberdashers in the world. The practical nurses who dressed and undressed us took a childish delight, even though we never went anywhere, in costuming us for imaginary social events for millionaires, for tea dances, for horse shows, for skiing vacations, for attending classes at expensive prep schools, for an evening of theater here in Manhattan and a supper afterwards with lots of champagne, and so on. Hi-ho. We were aware of all the comedy in this, but as brilliant as we were when we put our heads together, we did not guess until we were 15 that we were also in the midst of a tragedy. We thought that ugliness was simply amusing to people in the outside world. We did not realize that we could actually nauseate strangers who came upon us unexpectedly. We were so innocent as to the importance of good looks, in fact, that we could see little point to the story of the ugly duckling, which I read out loud to Eliza one day in the mausoleum of Professor Elihu Roosevelt Swain. The story, of course, was about a baby bird that was raised by ducks, who thought it was the funniest-looking duck they had ever seen, but then it turned out to be a swan when it grew up. Eliza, I remember, said she thought it would have been a much better story if the little bird had waddled up on shore and turned into a rhinoceros. Hi-ho! Until Chapter 8. Until the eve of our 15th birthday, Eliza and I never heard anything bad about ourselves when we eavesdropped from the secret passageways. The servants were so used to us that they hardly ever mentioned us, even in moments of deepest privacy. Dr. Mott seldom commented on anything but our appetites and our excretions, and our parents were so sickened by us that they were tongue-tied when they made their annual space voyage to our asteroid. Father, I remember, would talk to Mother rather haltingly and listlessly about world events he had read about in news magazines. They would bring up us toys from FAO Schwarz, guaranteed by that emporium to be educational for 3-year-olds. Hi-ho. Yes, and I think now about all the secrets about the human condition I withhold from young Melody and Isidore, for their own peace of mind, the fact that the human afterlife is no good, and so on. And then I am awed yet again by the perfect lulu of a secret that was concealed from Eliza and me so long, that our own parents wish we would hurry up and die. We imagined lazily that our 15th birthday would be like all the rest. We put on the show we had always put on. Our parents arrived at our supper time, which was 4 p.m. We would get our presents the next day. We threw food at each other in our tile-lined dining room. I hit Eliza with an avocado. She hit me with a filet mignon. We bounced Parker House rolls off the maid. We pretended not to know that our parents had arrived and were watching us through a crack in the door. Yes, and then, still not having greeted our parents face to face, we were bathed and talcumed, and dressed in our pajamas and bathrobe and bedroom slippers. Bedtime was at 5, for Eliza and I pretended to sleep 16 hours a day. Our practical nurses, who were Ovida Cooper and Mary Selwyn Kirk, told us that there was a wonderful surprise waiting for us in the library. We pretended to be gaga about what that surprise could possibly be. We were full-grown giants by then. I carried a rubber tugboat, which was supposedly my favorite toy. Eliza had a red velvet ribbon in the mare's nest of her coal-black hair. As always, there was a large coffee table between Eliza and me and our parents when we were brought in. As always, our parents had brandy to sip. As always, there was a fizzing, popping blaze of pine and sappy apple logs in the fireplace. As always, an oil painting of Professor Elihu Roosevelt Swain over the mantelpiece beamed down on the ritual scene. As always, our parents stood. They smiled up at us with what we still did not recognize as bittersweet dread. As always, we pretended to find them adorable, but not to remember who they were at first. As always, Father did the talking. "How do you do, Eliza and Wilbur?" he said. "You are looking very well. We are very glad to see you. Do you remember who we are?" Eliza and I consulted with one another uneasily, drooling and murmuring in ancient Greek. Eliza said to me in Greek, I remember, that she could not believe we were related to such pretty dolls. Father helped us out. He told us the name we had given to him years ago. "I am Bluffla," he said. Eliza and I pretended to be flabbergasted. "Bluffla," we told each other. We could not believe our good fortune. "Bluffla! Bluffla!" we cried. "And this," said Father, indicating Mother, "is Mublub." This was even more sensational news to Eliza and me. "Mublub! Mublub!" we exclaimed. And now Eliza and I made a great intellectual leap, as always. Without any hints from anybody, we concluded that if our parents were in the house, then our birthday must be close at hand. We chanted our idiot word for birthday, which was Fufpe. As always, we pretended to become overexcited. We jumped up and down. We were so big by then that the floor began to go up and down like a trampoline. But we suddenly stopped, pretending as always to have been rendered catatonic by more happiness than was good for us. That was always the end of the show. After that, We were led away. Hi-ho. 9. We were put into custom-made cribs in separate but adjacent bedrooms. The rooms were connected by a secret panel in the wall. The cribs were as big as railroad flat cars. They made a terrible clatter when their sides were raised. Eliza and I pretended to fall asleep at once. After half an hour, however, we were reunited in Eliza's room. The servants never looked in on us. Our health was perfect, after all, and we had established a reputation for being, as they said, as good as gold at bedtime. Yet we went through a trap door under Eliza's crib, and were soon taking turns watching our parents in the library through a tiny hole we ourselves had drilled through the wall, and through the upper corner of the frame around the painting of Professor Elihu Roosevelt Swain. Father was telling Mother of a thing he had read in a news magazine on the day before. It seemed that scientists in the People's Republic of China were experimenting with making human beings smaller, so they would not need to eat so much and wear such big clothes. Mother was staring into the fire. Father had to tell her twice about the Chinese rumor. The second time he did it, she replied emptily that she supposed that the Chinese could accomplish just about anything they put their minds to. Only a month before, the Chinese had sent 200 explorers to Mars without using a space vehicle of any kind. No scientist in the Western world could guess how the trick was done. The Chinese themselves volunteered no details. Fucking goddamn bug. Dude. Mother said that it seemed like such a long time since Americans had discovered anything. All of a sudden, she said, everything is being discovered by the Chinese. We used to discover everything, she said. It was such a stupefied conversation. The level of animation was so low that our beautiful young parents from Manhattan might have been up to their necks in honey. They appeared, as they had always appeared to Eliza and me, to be under some curse which required them to speak only of matters which did not interest them at all. And indeed they were under a malediction. But Eliza and I had not guessed its nature, that they were all but strangled and paralyzed by the wish that their own children would die. And I promise this about our parents, although the only proof I have is a feeling in my bones. Neither one had ever suggested in any way to the other that he or she wished we would die. Hi-ho! But then there was a bang in the fireplace. Steam had to escape from a trap in a sappy log. Yes, and Mother, because she was a symphony of chemical reactions like all other living things, gave a terrified shriek. Her chemicals insisted that she shriek in response to the bang. After the chemicals got her to do that, though, they wanted a lot more from her. They thought it was high time that she said what she really felt about Eliza and me, which she did. All sorts of other things went haywire when she said it. Her hands closed convulsively. Her spine buckled and her face shriveled to turn her into an old, old witch. I hate them, I hate them, I hate them, she said. And not many seconds passed before Mother said with spitting explicitness who it was she hated. I hate Wilbur Rockefeller Swain and Eliza Mellon Swain, she said. Chapter 10. Mother was temporarily insane that night. I got to know her well in later years, and, while I never learned to love her, or to love anyone, for that matter, I did admire her unwavering decency towards one and all. She was not a mistress of insults. When she spoke, either in public or in private, no reputations died. So it was not truly our mother who said, on the eve of our 15th birthday, "How can I love Count Dracula and his blushing bride?" meaning Eliza and me. It was not truly our mother who asked our father, "How on earth did I ever give birth to a pair of drooling totem poles?" and so on. As for father, he engulfed her in his arms. He was weeping with love and pity. oh Caleb, she said in his arms. This isn't me. Of course not, he said. Forgive me, she said. Of course, he said. Will God ever forgive me? She said. He already has, he said. It was as though a devil all of a sudden got inside of me, she said. That's what it was, Tish, he said. Her madness was subsiding now. Oh, Caleb, she said. Lest I seem to be fishing for sympathy, let me say that right now that Eliza and I in those days were about as emotionally vulnerable as the great stone face in New Hampshire. We needed a mother's and father's love about as much as a fish needs a bicycle, as the saying goes. So when our mother spoke badly of us, even wish we would die, our response was intellectual. We enjoyed solving problems. Perhaps mother's problems was one we could solve, short of suicide, of course. She pulled herself together again, eventually. She steeled herself for another 100 birthdays with Eliza and me, but in case God wished to test her in that way. But before she did that, she said this. I would give anything, Caleb, for the faintest sign of intelligence, the merest flicker of humaneness in the eyes of either twin. That was easily arranged. Hi-ho! So Eliza and I went back to Eliza's room, and we painted a big sign on a bedsheet. Then, after our parents were sound asleep, we stole into their room through the fake back in the armoire. We hung the sign on the wall so it would be the first thing they saw when they woke up. This is what it said. Dear Mater and Pater, we can never be pretty, but we can be as smart or as dumb as the world really wants us to be. Your faithful servants, Eliza Mellon Swain, Wilbur Rockefeller Swain. Hi-ho. Chapter 11. Thus did Eliza and I destroy our paradise, our nation of two. We arose the next morning before our parents did, before the servants could come to dress us. We sensed no danger. We supposed ourselves to still be in paradise as we dressed ourselves. I chose to wear a conservative blue pinstripe three-piece suit. I remember. Eliza chose to wear a cashmere sweater, a tweed skirt, and pearls. We agreed that Eliza should be our spokesman at first, since she had a rich alto voice. My voice did not have the authority to announce calmingly but convincingly that, in effect, the world had just turned upside down. Remember, please, that almost all that anyone had ever heard us say up to then was buh and duh and so on. Now we encountered Ovida Cooper, our practical nurse, in the colonnaded green marble foyer. She was startled to see us up and dressed. Before she could comment on this, though, Eliza and I leaned our heads together and put them in actual contact, just above our ears. The single genius we composed thereby then spoke to Ovida in Eliza's voice, which was as lovely as a viola. This is what that voice said. Good morning, Ovida. A new life begins for all of us today. As you can see and hear, Wilbur and I are no longer idiots. A miracle has taken place overnight. Our parents' dreams have come true. We are healed. As for you, Ovida, you will keep your apartment and your color television, and perhaps even receive a salary increase, as a reward for all you did to make this miracle come to pass. No one on the staff will experience any change, except for this one. Life here will become even easier and more pleasant than it was before. Ovida, a bleak Yankee dumpling, was hypnotized, like a rabbit who has met a rattlesnake. But Eliza and I were not a rattlesnake. With our heads together, we are one of the gentlest geniuses the world has ever known. We will not be using the tiled dining room anymore, said Eliza's voice. We have lovely manners, as you shall see. Please have our breakfast served in the solarium, and notify us when Mater and Pater are up and around. It would be very nice if, from now on, you would address my brother and me as Master Wilbur and Mistress Eliza. You may go now, and tell the others about the miracle." Ovida remained transfixed. I at last had to snap my fingers under her nose to wake her up. She curtsied. "As you wish, Mistress Eliza," she said, and she went to spread the news. As we settled ourselves in the solarium, the rest of the staff straggled in humbly to have a look at the young master and the young mistress we had become. We greeted them by their full names. We asked them friendly questions, which indicated that we had a detailed understanding of their lives. We apologized for having perhaps shocked some of them for changing so quickly. We simply did not realize, Eliza said, that anybody wanted us to be intelligent. We were by then so in charge of things that I, too, dared to speak of important matters. My high voice wouldn't be silly any more. "With your cooperation," I said, "we will make this mansion famous for intelligence as it has been for infamous for idiocy in days gone by. Let the fences come down." "Are there any questions?" said Eliza. There were none. Somebody called Dr. Mott. Our mother did not come down for breakfast. She remained in bed, petrified. Father came down alone. He was wearing his night clothes. He had not shaved. Young as he was palsied and drawn. Eliza and I were puzzled that he did not look happier. We hailed him not only in English, but in several other languages we knew. It was to one of these foreign salutations that he responded at last. "Bonjour," he said. "Sit thee doon, said Eliza merrily. The poor man sat. He was sick with guilt, of course, over having allowed intelligent human beings, his own flesh and blood, to be treated like idiots for so long. Worse, his conscience and his advisers had told him before that it was all right if he could not love us, since we were incapable of deep feelings, and since there was nothing about us, objectively, that anyone in his right mind could love. But now it was his duty to love us, and he did not think he could do it. He was horrified to discover what our mother knew she would discover if she came downstairs, that intelligence and sensitivity in monstrous bodies like Eliza's and mine merely made us more repulsive. This was not father's fault or mother's fault. It was not anybody's fault. It was as natural as breathing to all human beings, and to all warm-blooded creatures, for that matter, to wish quick deaths for monsters. It was an instinct. And now Eliza and I had raised that instinct to intolerable tragedy. Without knowing what we were doing, Eliza and I were putting the traditional curse of monsters on normal creatures. We were asking for respect. Chapter 12. In the midst of all the excitement, Eliza and I allowed our heads to be separated by several feet, so we were not thinking brilliantly anymore. We became dumb enough to think that father was merely sleepy, so we made him drink coffee, and we tried to wake him with some songs and riddles we knew. I remember I asked him if he knew why cream was so much more expensive than milk. He mumbled that he didn't know the answer. So Eliza told him, it's because the cows hate to squat on the little bottles. We laughed about that. We rolled on the floor. And then Eliza got up and stood over him, with her hands on her hips, and scolded him affectionately, as though he were a little boy. "Oh, what a sleepy head," she said. "Oh, what a sleepy head." At that moment, Dr. Stuart Rawling Mott arrived. Although Dr. Mott had been told on the telephone about Eliza's and my sudden metamorphosis, the day was like any other to him, seemingly. He said what he always said when he arrived at the mansion. "And how is everybody today?" Now I spoke the first intelligent sentence Dr. Mott had ever heard from me. "Father won't wake up," I said. "Won't he now?" he replied. He rewarded the completeness of my sentence with the faintest of smiles. Dr. Mott was so unbelievably bland, in fact, that he turned away from us to chat with Ovida Cooper, the practical nurse. Her mother had apparently been sick down in the hamlet. "Ovida," he said, "you'll be pleased to know that your mother's temperature is almost normal." Father was angered by this casualness, and no doubt glad to find someone with whom he could be openly angry. "How long has this been going on, Doctor?" he wanted to know. "How long have you known about their intelligence?" Dr. Mott looked at his watch. "Since about 42 minutes ago," he said. "You don't seem in the least surprised," said Father. Dr. Mott appeared to think this over. Then he shrugged. "I'm certainly very happy for everybody," he said. I think it was the fact that Dr. Mott himself did not look at all happy when he said that, which caused Eliza and me to put our heads together again. Something very queer was going on that we badly needed to understand. Our genius did not fail us. It allowed us to understand the truth of the situation, that we were somehow more tragic than ever. But our genius, like all geniuses, suffered periodic fits of monumental naivete. It did so now. It told us that all we had to do to make everything all right again was to return to idiocy. "Blah," said Eliza. "Duh," I said. I farted. Eliza drooled. I picked up a buttered scone and threw it at the head of Ovida Cooper. Eliza turned to Father. "Bluffwa," he said. She said. "Fluffbay," I cried. Father cried. 13. 6 days have passed since I began to write this memoir. On 4 of the days, the gravity was medium, what it used to be in olden times. It was so heavy yesterday that I could hardly get out of bed, out of my nest of rags in the lobby of the Empire State Building. When I had to go to the elevator shaft we used for a toilet, making my way through the thicket of candlesticks I own, I crawl on all fours. Hi-ho. Well, the gravity was light on the first day, and it is light again today. I have an erection again, and so does Isidore, the lover of my granddaughter Melody. So does every male on the island. Yes, and Melody and Isidore have packed a picnic lunch, and have gone bounding up to the intersection of Broadway and 42nd Street, where, on days of light gravity, they are building a rustic pyramid. They do not shape the slabs and chunks and boulders they put into it, and neither do they limit their materials to masonry. They throw in I-beams and oil drums and tires and automobile parts and office furniture and theater seats, too, and all manner of junk. But I have seen the results, and what they are building will not be an amorphous trash pile when it is done. It will clearly be a pyramid. Yes, and if archaeologists of the future find this book of mine, they will be spared the fruitless labor of digging through the pyramid in search of its meaning. There are no secret treasure rooms in there, no chambers of any kind. Its meaning, which is minuscule in any event, lies beneath the manhole cover over which the pyramid is constructed. It is the body of a stillborn male. The infant is enclosed in an ornate box which was once a humidor for fine cigars. That box was placed on the floor of the manhole 4 years ago, amid all the cables and pipes down there, by Melody, who was its mother at the age of 12, and by me, who was its great-grandfather, and by our nearest neighbor and dearest friend, Vera Chipmunk 5 Zappa. The pyramid itself is entirely the idea of Melody and Isidore, who became her lover later on. It is a monument to a life that was never lived, to a person who was never named. Hi-ho. It is not necessary to dig through the pyramid to reach the box. It can be reached through other manholes. Beware of rats. Since the infant was an heir of mine, the pyramid might be called this: the tomb of the Prince of Candlesticks. The name of the father of the Prince of Candlesticks is unknown. He forced his attentions on Melody on the outskirts of Schenectady. She was on her way from Detroit in the Kingdom of Michigan to the Island of Death. where she hoped to find her grandfather, who was the legendary Dr. Wilbur Daffodil 11 Swain. Melody is pregnant again, this time by Isidore. She is a bow-legged little thing, rickety and snaggle-toothed, but cheerful. She ate very badly as a child, as an orphan in the harem of the King of Michigan. Melody sometimes looks to me like a merry old Chinese woman, although she is only 16. A pregnant girl who looks like that is a sad thing for a pediatrician to see. But the love that the robust and rosy Isidore gives her counterbalances my sadness with joy. Like almost all the members of his family, the Raspberries, Isidore has nearly all his teeth, and remains upright even when the gravity is most severe. He carries Melody around in his arms on days like that, and has offered to carry me. The Raspberries are food gatherers, mainly, living in and around the ruins of the New York Stock Exchange. They fish off docks. They mine for canned goods. They pick fruits and berries they find. They grow their own tomatoes and potatoes and radishes and little more. They trap rats and bats and dogs and cats and birds and eat them. A raspberry will eat anything. 14. I wish Melody what our grandparents once wished Eliza and me, a short but happy life on an asteroid. Hi-ho. Yes, and I have already said, Eliza and I might have had a long and happy life on an asteroid if we had not showed off our intelligence one day. We might have been in the mansion still, burning the trees and the furniture and the banisters and the paneling for warmth, and drooling and babbling when strangers came. We could have raised chickens. We could have had a little vegetable garden. We could have amused ourselves with our ever-increasing wisdom, caring nothing for its possible usefulness. The sun is going down. Thin clouds of bats stream out from the subway, jittering, squeaking, disappearing like gas. As always, I shudder. I can't think of their noise as a noise. It is a disease of silence instead. I ride on, in the light of a burning rag in a bowl of animal fat. I have 1,000 candlesticks, but no candles. Melody and Isidore play backgammon on a board I painted on the lobby floor. They double and redouble each other, and laugh. They are planning a party for my 101st birthday, which is a month away. I eavesdrop on them sometimes. Old habits are hard to break. Vera Chipmunk 5 Zappa is making new costumes for the occasion, for herself and her slaves. She has a mountain of cloth in her storeroom in Turtle Bay. The slaves will wear pink pantaloons and golden slippers and green silk turbans with ostrich feather plumes, I heard Melody say. Vera will be born to a party in a sedan chair, I've heard, surrounded by slaves carrying presents and food and drink and torches, and frightening away wild dogs with the clangor of dinner bells. Hi-ho. I must be very careful with my drinking at my birthday party. If I drank too much, I might spill the beans to everybody. That the life that awaits us after death is infinitely more tiresome than this one. Hi-ho. We will pick up on more later. Thanks for listening.